You need to understand your position in this organization. Connor Hayes didn't even blink when he said it. His fingers were busy straightening the stack of papers in front of him, aligning the edges with mechanical precision. We were sitting in conference room 7B, the one with the flickering fluorescent light and the faint smell of industrial carpet cleaner that never quite masked the underlying odor of stale coffee. The room had beige walls, a motivational poster about teamwork featuring rowing teams in perfect synchronization, and a box of generic tissues on the corner table that had probably been sitting there since the office opened. Nobody ever used those tissues. Crying in front of HR felt like admitting you'd already lost. Connor had scheduled this meeting with a calendar invite at 8:47 a.m. Annual compensation adjustment, confidential. I'd seen those invites before. They never meant good news. Confidential was corporate code for, we're about to disappoint you and we don't want you discussing it with your colleagues. He slid the paper across the synthetic wood table. His watch caught the light, expensive and polished. The kind of detail you notice when someone won't look you in the eye. This outlines your updated compensation structure for the upcoming fiscal year, he said in that rehearsed monotone HR professionals perfect over years of delivering bad news. You'll see your merit adjustment reflected here. I looked down at the document. Senior Data Architect, 7 years service merit increase, 2.5%. And below that in smaller font like they hoped I'd skim past it, compensation aligned with organizational equity standards. I'd heard that phrase before. Last year. The year before that. Every single time someone questioned why their paycheck didn't reflect their actual contribution. Organizational equity standards. Corporate speak for, we've decided what you're worth and arguing about it won't change our minds. 2.5%, I said quietly. Correct, Connor replied. That falls within the standard range for tenured technical staff. I leaned back in the uncomfortable chair that was probably designed specifically to make these meetings end faster. What about Ethan? Connor's pen stopped moving. Just for a fraction of a second. Then he forced a smile that looked more like a muscle spasm. I'm not sure what you're asking. Ethan Foster, I said clearly. The new director of data strategy. He started 4 months ago. The smile tightened into something brittle. I can't discuss another employee's compensation with you, Kennedy. You know that. He's making nearly double my salary, I said. Isn't he? Connor set his pen down with deliberate care, buying himself time to calculate how honest he could afford to be. Ethan brings different qualifications to the organization, he said finally. Different how? He holds an MBA from a prestigious business school, Connor said, sitting straighter like the credential itself added weight to his argument. He has extensive leadership experience. His role requires strategic vision that aligns with executive objectives. I let those words hang in the air for a moment. And I have a master's degree in computer science, 7 years of building every data system this company runs, and I've personally saved us from at least a dozen catastrophic failures, I said evenly. But Ethan has an MBA, so that's worth twice as much. Different roles command different market rates, Connor said, his voice taking on that careful HR neutrality. Leadership positions are benchmarked differently than technical positions. That's standard across the industry. So technical expertise is worth half of what a degree in business administration is worth, I said. Even when that technical expertise is literally keeping the company functional. Kennedy, I understand you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated, I interrupted. I'm clarifying. Because it sounds like you're telling me that someone with zero understanding of our data infrastructure, zero experience with our systems, and zero contribution to actually building anything is worth twice what I am. I just want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly. Connor folded his hands on the table. Professional. Controlled. Unmoved by anything resembling logic or fairness. We benchmark compensation against external market data, he said, his voice cooling several degrees. Leadership roles command premium salaries. Credentials matter. Education matters. Translation. Titles matter more than competence. We value all our employees, he continued in that practiced recitation. But we have to maintain fairness across the entire organization. Translation. Know your place. There was. Not even dressed up anymore. The subtext had become text. I looked at him for a long moment. At his perfectly pressed shirt. at his expensive watch, at the checklist sitting next to my compensation document, my name at the top with little boxes he'd probably tick off the moment I left. Employee notified. Expectations set. Matter closed. Then I reached into my bag. Connor tensed. Just slightly. Like he thought I might pull out a legal document or a list of grievances or maybe a lawyer's business card. Instead, I took out a single piece of paper folded once and placed it on top of his compensation document. Cling. White. Already signed. My resignation letter. His eyes dropped to it. I watched the blood drain from his face as he read the first line. Effective immediately, I resign from my position as Senior Data Architect at Catalyst Solutions Group. Kennedy, he started, voice cracking slightly. I sent a copy to your inbox at 9:04 a.m., I said calmly. You'll see it when you check your email. Along with copies to my direct manager, the CTO, and the VP of Operations. He blinked at the signature. At the date. At words that couldn't be unsaid or negotiated away. You don't need to make this decision right now, he said quickly, professional mask slipping for the first time. This is a significant step. Talk to your manager. Sleep on it. We can revisit the numbers. I've been sleeping on it for 7 years, I said, standing. This is me waking up. Connor opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But you told me to understand my position in this organization, I said, picking up my bag. So I do. And my position is somewhere else. I left the resignation letter on the table and walked out. By 9:12 a.m., my security badge had been flagged for deactivation. By 9:18 a.m., my system access was being revoked across 17 production environments. By 9:23 a.m. I'd cleared my desk, boxed up my second monitor and the coffee mug that said, "Select asterisk from problems where solution is null," and walked past 4 colleagues who suddenly became very interested in their keyboards. By 9:31 a.m., the first critical alert started screaming. By 9:38 a.m., every data engineer in the building was in emergency mode, staring at cascading system failures they'd never encountered before and had no idea how to stop. And at exactly 9:47 a.m., 36 minutes after I'd placed that resignation letter on Connor's desk, the CTO was standing outside my apartment, jacket rumpled, hair disheveled, knocking like someone whose entire data infrastructure was collapsing, and he'd just realized he'd let the only person who understood it walk away. "Kennedy," Elliot Vaughn said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need you back immediately." I looked at him through the gap in my doorway. Normally pristine suit now wrinkled. Tie loosened. Face pale with something between panic and desperation. "I don't work there anymore," I said. "I know," he said, voice tight. "But the data pipeline is completely down. The analytics platform crashed. We can't process any customer data. Nobody can figure out why." "That sounds like your problem," I said. "Not mine." His jaw clenched. "Kennedy, please. Just for today. We'll pay you. Consulting rate. Whatever you want." I shook my head slowly. "No." "Why not?" "Because 36 minutes ago," I said, "your company made it very clear what I'm worth to them. So now you get to learn what your systems are worth without me." I closed the door. "But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you exactly how a quiet, underpaid data architect, one dismissive sentence in an HR meeting, and 7 years of warnings nobody listened to turned into the most expensive 36 minutes in Catalyst Solutions Group's history. If you like stories where the person who's been holding everything together finally walks away, and the people who said, "Anyone can do your job," learn a very expensive lesson about what anyone actually looks like under pressure, hit that subscribe button. Because this isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when companies forget that the people keeping the lights on aren't the ones with fancy degrees and executive titles. They're the ones who know where all the wiring is. And what happens when you insult them one time too many. My name is Kennedy Brooks. I'm 34 years old. I don't have an MBA. I don't have an Ivy League degree. What I have is a master's in computer science from a state university and 7 years of institutional knowledge about a data infrastructure so complex and fragile that it required constant vigilance just to keep it running. Before Catalyst Solutions Group, I spent 3 years working at a startup that crashed and burned, teaching me exactly how systems fail when nobody's paying attention. Not in theory. In practice. With data corruption at midnight and no senior engineers to call because you were the senior engineer. That's where I learned the 2 rules that define my career. Rule 1. Systems fail in predictable patterns. Learn the patterns or watch everything collapse. Rule 2. The people who ignore the patterns are always the furthest from the actual work. When Catalyst Solutions Group hired me 7 years ago, they were a mid-sized financial analytics company trying to compete with firms 10 times their size. On paper, they provided real-time market intelligence for institutional investors. In reality, they ran a fragile collection of data pipelines, databases, and analytics platforms held together with outdated code, manual processes, and the desperate prayers of 2 exhausted engineers. We had one primary data center in Texas, one backup facility in Oregon that had never been properly tested, a monitoring system that could tell you something broke but not what or why, batch jobs running on schedules nobody understood anymore, a database that locked up whenever anyone ran a complex query, and documentation that was 18 months out of date on a good day. My interview was with the then CTO, a man named Harold Zhang who'd built his career on actual technical work before getting promoted into management and still remembered what engineering looked like. "Can you keep this infrastructure from falling apart?" he asked, gesturing at a whiteboard covered in architecture diagrams that looked more like a crime scene sketch than a system design. "Depends," I said. "Can I actually fix things or will I just be putting out fires?" "If you can justify the changes," he said, "you can make them." "Then yes," I said. He hired me that afternoon. The first month I just observed. I sat in on incident calls, read postmortem reports, trace data flows, talk to the engineers who'd been there long enough to know where all the problems were buried but too burned out to fix them. The second month I started documenting failure patterns. Not theoretical ones. Real ones. Every time something broke I wrote it down. What failed, why it failed, what the warning signs were, what we did to fix it, whether the fix actually worked or just delayed the inevitable next failure. Kept a notebook. Physical, pen and paper. Because digital documentation gets deleted or lost or archived when someone decides it's not important anymore. That notebook saved the company more times than anyone ever knew. By the third month, I'd identified the 12 most critical vulnerabilities in our infrastructure. I documented them. I presented them to Harold. I showed him the data, the patterns, the risks. "How much to fix all of this?" he asked. 8 months of dedicated work, I said. And the authority to push back when people want me to rush it. "You have both," he said. "I rebuilt the monitoring infrastructure first because you can't fix what you can't see. I created dashboards that showed not just is it working but how close are we to failure. Error rate trends, query performance degradation, storage capacity projections, pipeline latency patterns. All the early warning signs that let you prevent disasters instead of just responding to them. Then I rebuilt the data pipelines. Properly. With error handling, retry logic, dead letter queues, automated alerts and comprehensive logging. By the end of year 1 we had actual observability, real redundancy, and runbooks that didn't just say, restart everything and hope. By year 2 I trained 3 junior engineers on how to read the warning signs, how to debug without panicking, how to escalate without waiting for permission. By year 3 I was the person everyone called at 2 a.m. when things went sideways. Not because I was on call. Because I was the only one who'd seen these specific failure modes before and knew how to untangle them without making things worse. I became the institutional memory nobody wanted to admit they depended on. And for a while that was fine. The company grew. We added more clients, more data sources, more complexity. Revenue increased. The board was happy. Executives got their bonuses. I got a 2.8% raise and a company mug. I didn't complain. Not because I didn't care but because I believed that eventually competence would be recognized. That was my first mistake. The shift started when Catalyst Solutions Group decided it needed to professionalize its leadership structure. That was the phrase used by the new CEO, Preston Wolf, former management consultant brought in by the board to scale the business for the next phase of growth. Preston loved words like synergize, and optimize, and strategic realignment. He did not love words like technical debt or infrastructure risk, or that's going to break if we don't address it first. Within 6 months of Preston taking over, the company started hiring differently. Less emphasis on people who understood how things worked. More emphasis on people who understood how to make things sound impressive in board meetings. We got directors with MBAs who'd never written a line of code. We got VPs who could talk about driving operational excellence, but couldn't explain what a database index actually did. We got consultants billing $500 an hour to tell us we should leverage cloud-native paradigms. And we got Ethan Foster, MBA from a top-tier business school, 5 years at a strategy consulting firm, 0 technical background. His title, Director of Data Strategy. His job, align data initiatives with business objectives. Translation. Sit in meetings, sound confident, and make sure every decision looked good in PowerPoint presentations. Ethan was excellent at that part. He knew how to talk, how to frame things, how to make a routine database migration sound like a transformative strategic initiative. He knew how to get executives nodding. What he didn't know and didn't seem interested in learning was how anything actually worked. That became a problem immediately. Ethan started inserting himself into technical decisions. Not because he understood them, because he decided that data strategy meant he should have visibility into everything. He'd show up to architecture reviews with questions like, can we just use AI to optimize this? Or, why don't we migrate everything to the cloud? Or, what if we use blockchain? The kind of questions that sound intelligent to people who don't know better and make engineers want to scream into the void. At first, I tried to be diplomatic. That's an interesting idea, but here's why it won't work in our environment. He'd smile, nod, then rephrase the exact same idea in the next meeting like I hadn't spoken. Eventually I stopped explaining. I just started documenting his suggestions in meeting notes along with the technical reasons they wouldn't work. That way when they inevitably failed there'd be a record. I wasn't trying to be vindictive. I was trying to protect the engineers who'd have to clean up the mess. But Ethan didn't like being documented. He started routing around me, going directly to junior engineers and asking them to just try something quick. Promising them visibility, career opportunities, FaceTime with executives. And some of them, desperate to get noticed, would say yes. That's how we ended up with a production deployment on a Friday afternoon that corrupted 3 days of customer data because someone had implemented a quick optimization Ethan suggested without understanding what it actually did. I fixed it. I wrote the postmortem. I added another entry to my notebook. New failure mode. Decisions made by people who don't understand consequences. Nobody read the postmortem except the engineers. Ethan got promoted 4 months later. I found out about the pay disparity by accident. One of the junior engineers, Oliver, had been careless with file permissions. He'd uploaded his offer letter to a shared drive instead of his personal folder. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a document Oliver had promised to upload about a database schema change. I clicked the wrong file. And there it was. Offer letter, Director of Data Strategy, Ethan Foster. I should have closed it. I didn't. I opened it. Base salary, $178,000 signing bonus, $20,000 annual bonus target, 25% stock options, 12,000 shares. I stared at it. Then I opened my most recent pay stub. Base salary, $89,500, no signing bonus. Annual bonus target, 8%, which I'd received exactly once in 7 years. Stock options, 1,500 shares from my original offer. Nonsense. 4 months at the company. 0 technical knowledge. 0 systems saved from catastrophic failure. Making almost exactly double my salary. I closed both files. Then I sat there for a very long time staring at nothing. I didn't get angry. Anger would have been simpler. I got clear. That evening I updated my resume for the first time in 5 years. I reached out to 3 recruiters I'd been ignoring for years. I took calls with companies I'd previously dismissed as not the right fit. Within 2 weeks I had 4 offers. Within 3 weeks I'd accepted one. All I needed was the right moment to leave. Sure gave it to me. The compensation review meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Connor Hayes had sent the calendar invite with no context. Just, annual compensation adjustment, confidential. I knew what it meant. They were going to offer me another insulting raise and expect gratitude. I prepared for it. I'd written my resignation letter the night before. Printed it. Signed it. Put it in my bag. Just in case. When Connor slid that paper across the table and I saw 2.5% merit increase, I wasn't even surprised. Just tired. Tired of being undervalued. Tired of watching people with better credentials and worse judgment get paid more. Tired of hearing "we value you" from people who demonstrably didn't. So when he said, "You need to understand your position in this organization," that was it. Not because it was the worst thing anyone had ever said to me. Because it was the truth they'd been dancing around for 7 years, finally spoken plainly. I pulled out my resignation letter and put it on the table. Connor's face went white. "Kennedy, don't be impulsive." "I'm not," I said. "I've been thinking about this for 3 weeks. This meeting just confirmed I'm making the right choice. We can revisit the numbers." "No," I said. "You can't. Because the problem isn't the number. It's the disrespect." I stood up. "Good luck replacing me," I said. Then I walked out. I didn't go to my desk. I went straight to my car, drove home and started my exit checklist. I'd built it years ago. A mental run book for how to leave cleanly. Return company laptop. Done. Return security badge. Done. Forward personal contacts to personal email. Done. Download portfolio work. Already done weeks ago. Leave documentation. Already existed. Whether they'd read it was their problem now. By 9:27 a.m. I was sitting on my couch filling out onboarding paperwork for my new job. My phone buzzed. A text from Aisha, one of the senior engineers. "What happened?" "They just killed your access." I typed back, "I resigned." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Are you serious?" "Completely." Why? I thought about how to answer that. Then I decided honesty was simpler. Because they told me to know my place. So I did. And it's not there. Aisha didn't respond right away. Then holy shit. Good luck. I set the phone down. Then it buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another call. Different number. Voicemail again. Then my phone lit up with a notification from our company Slack, even though my access should have been revoked. Someone had added me to an emergency incident channel. The pinned message. Critical. All data pipelines down. All hands needed immediately. I stared at it. Then I logged out of Slack, deleted the app from my phone and went back to my onboarding paperwork. At 9:47 a.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. Not a polite knock. An urgent one. I looked through the peephole. Elliot von Theo. Normally immaculate. Now disheveled. I opened the door. "Kennedy," he said, breathless. "Thank God. We need you right now." "I don't work there anymore," I said. "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But the entire data infrastructure is down. Completely down. We can't figure out why. Aisha and Oliver are trying, but they don't understand the legacy architecture like you do." "That's not my problem," I said. "We'll pay you," Elliot said quickly. "Consulting rate. Name your price." "It's not about money," I said. "Then what?" "Respect," I said. "Which your company made crystal clear this morning it doesn't have for me." Elliot's face tightened. "I didn't know about the compensation conversation." "But you knew I was underpaid," I said. "Everyone knew. And nobody fixed it. So now you get to fix this without me. Clients are threatening to pull their contracts." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you let HR tell me to understand my position." His jaw clenched. "Is there anything I can say?" "Yes," I replied. "You can say you made a mistake and you're going to learn from it. Then you can leave." I closed the door. This time I locked it. Elliot knocked 3 more times. Then he left. I went back to my paperwork and let them learn. The outage lasted 11 hours. I didn't watch it happen in real time. I heard about it later in pieces from engineers who were still willing to talk to me. Here's what I was told. At 9:19 a.m. the primary data ingestion pipeline started throwing errors. Not complete failure. Just elevated error rates. Oliver, the junior engineer on call, saw the alerts. He checked the runbook I'd written 2 years ago. The runbook said, if ingestion pipeline shows elevated errors, check queue depth and service health. He did. Everything looked fine. So he escalated to Aisha. Aisha did what she'd seen me do dozens of times. Opened multiple terminal windows, tailed logs, looked for patterns. She saw something strange. The ingestion pipeline was receiving data. It was trying to write to the primary database. But the writes were timing out. Not immediately. Fully. Slow enough that retry logic was kicking in, which generated more write attempts, which made the problem worse. Aisha recognized the pattern, but she didn't know why it was happening. The piece she was missing was in my notebook, written 14 months earlier after a similar incident. If ingestion pipeline shows slow writes to primary DB and queue depth is normal, check connection pool settings on the read replica. It doesn't auto-scale and will silently exhaust the pool, causing cascading timeouts. Nobody else knew that because I'd fixed it quietly, documented it in my notes, and added a monitoring alert that would catch it early. An alert that was now firing. But nobody was reading the alert description. They were just seeing elevated errors and assuming it was something else. At 9:33 a.m., Ethan walked into the operations center. "Why is the dashboard red?" he asked. "We're investigating," Aisha said. "Investigating doesn't generate revenue," Ethan replied. "Can't you just restart it?" Aisha hesitated. "We need to identify the root cause first." "How long will that take?" "I don't know." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Elliot." Elliot showed up 8 minutes later. He looked at the dashboard, at the error graphs climbing, at the engineers who were clearly overwhelmed. "Where's Kennedy?" he asked. "She resigned this morning," Ethan said. "Over a compensation issue." Elliot's face went pale. "You let her walk today?" "I didn't let her do anything," Ethan said defensively. "She made a choice." "A choice you forced," Elliot snapped. "Then he left to come to my apartment." Which is when I closed the door in his face. By the time Elliot got back to the office, the error rate had quadrupled. Clients were calling. The largest one, a hedge fund that did $15 million in annual business with Catalyst, sent an email with the subject line, "Service interruption. Immediate escalation required." Preston Wolf, the CEO, got pulled into the crisis. He took one look at the dashboard and said, "Why can't we fix this?" "Because the person who built this infrastructure quit this morning," Elliot said flatly. Preston's expression shifted from concern to fury in about 2 seconds. "Why did she quit?" Elliot glanced at Connor Hayes, who'd appeared in the operations center. Connor suddenly found the floor fascinating. "Compensation issue," Elliot said carefully. "Fix it," Preston said. "Offer her whatever it takes." "I tried," Elliot said. "She said no." Preston stared at him. "Then offer her more." "It's not about money," Elliot said. "It's about respect. And we just spent 7 years showing her we don't have any." The room went quiet. Preston turned to the engineers. "Can you fix this without her?" Aisha spoke up, voice tight. "We're trying. But there are configurations Kennedy implemented that aren't documented anywhere we can find. We can see the symptoms, but we don't know the root cause." "How long?" Preston asked. "Hours. Maybe longer." "We don't have hours," Preston said. "Every minute this is down, we're losing money and credibility." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Kennedy myself." I ignored the call. He tried twice more. Both went to voicemail. He left a message. "Kennedy, this is Preston Wolf. I understand there was an issue with your compensation this morning. I take full responsibility. Whatever you want, salary, title, equity, will make it happen. Please call me back. We need you." I listened to the voicemail. Then I deleted it. By 1 p.m. they'd managed a partial fix. They restarted the database cluster. That cleared the connection pool. Data ingestion came back online for about 20 minutes. Then it crashed again. Harder this time. Because the restart had flushed a massive backlog of queued transactions all at once. And the downstream analytics systems weren't designed to handle that spike. Now they had 2 problems instead of 1. By 3 p.m., 3 major clients had sent formal breach notices. By 4 p.m., the stock price had dropped 6%. By 5 p.m., they'd brought in an emergency consulting firm that specialized in infrastructure crisis recovery. The consultant spent 90 minutes asking questions, examining logs, and eventually admitted, "Without the original architect, this is going to take time. Days, possibly weeks, to fully understand and stabilize." Preston looked at Elliot. "You're telling me we're dead in the water because one engineer quit?" "I'm telling you we're dead in the water because we treated one engineer like she didn't matter," Elliot said. "And now we're learning what happens when she's not here to save us." The outage was finally resolved at 8:17 p.m. Not because they figured it out. Because one of the junior engineers, Oliver, finally found an old wiki page I'd written buried in the company intranet titled, Data Pipeline Failure Modes and Emergency Recovery Procedures. It had everything. The connection pool issue. The retry storm problem. The exact steps to recover without causing secondary failures. I'd written it 2 years ago after an incident almost identical to this one. And nobody had read it until they had no other choice. Oliver followed the runbook step by step. It worked. Systems stabilized. Clients stopped screaming. The crisis was over. But the damage was done. The aftermath unfolded over the next 4 months. I didn't see most of it directly, but word travels. Especially in an industry where everyone knows everyone. Here's what happened. Week 1. 2 major clients formally terminated their contracts. Combined annual revenue, $22 million. Preston held an emergency board meeting. Elliot was instructed to fix the engineering retention problem immediately. Ethan was quietly reassigned to a strategic advisory role, with no direct reports. Connor Hayes was let go. Not officially for my resignation. Officially for organizational restructuring. But everyone knew. Phew. Elliot reached out to me again. Not by phone this time. By email. Professional, contrite. He offered $165,000 base salary, nearly double my old pay, 20% annual bonus, 15,000 stock options, title bump to principal data architect, direct reporting to him, not through Ethan. The email ended with, I know we failed you. I'm asking for a chance to make it right. I read it 3 times. Then I responded, I appreciate the offer, but I've already started at my new company. I'm happy here. I hope you find someone who can help you rebuild. Best of luck. Week 3. A recruiter contacted me. Catalyst had posted an opening for principal data architect. The job description was almost word for word what I used to do. The posted salary range, $150,000 to $190,000. They'd finally figured out what I was worth. A week after I left. Month 2. I heard through the grapevine that Preston had commissioned an external audit of engineering operations. The audit found over-reliance on undocumented individual expertise, insufficient knowledge transfer processes, compensation misalignment with market rates for critical technical roles, management structure that prioritized credentials over competence. The report's summary, which eventually leaked. The organization created a single point of failure by undervaluing the individual responsible for institutional knowledge. This represents a systemic failure of leadership. For executives were quietly asked to step down. Preston wasn't one of them, but his bonus was cut by 70%. Month 3. I got a LinkedIn message from Harold Zhang, the former CTO who'd hired me 7 years ago and had since retired. Heard what happened. I'm sorry. You deserved better. For what it's worth, I always knew they were making a mistake undervaluing you. I tried to fix it before I left. Clearly didn't try hard enough. If you ever want to grab coffee, let me know. I appreciated that. Not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed what I'd always suspected. The people who actually understood systems knew what I was worth. It was the people who only understood spreadsheets who didn't. My new job was everything Catalyst Solutions Group wasn't. The company, a cybersecurity analytics firm called Ironclad Data Systems, had reached out to me through a recruiter 8 months before I quit. Back then I'd politely declined. But I'd kept the recruiter's information. When I called her back after my resignation, she remembered me immediately. You ready to move? She asked. I'm ready to be valued, I said. The interview process was fast. 3 conversations. 1 technical deep dive. 1 architecture review. The CTO, a woman named Dr. Camila Reyes who'd spent 15 years doing actual engineering before moving into leadership, asked me one question that told me everything I needed to know. What's the worst incident you ever responded to, and what did it teach you? I told her about the data corruption incident from 2 years ago. The one I documented and nobody had read. She nodded slowly. If you join us, she said, that documentation won't sit in an archive. It'll be required reading. We take knowledge sharing seriously because we've learned the expensive way that talented people leave. And when they do, we need to make sure the organization still knows what they knew. I accepted the offer that afternoon. Starting salary, $155,000. Bonus 18%. Stock options, 14,000 shares. But more than that, respect. On my first day, Camila introduced me to the engineering team. This is Kennedy, she said. She's joining us as a principal data architect. She has more real-world incident response experience than most of us combined. When she tells you something about systems, listen. Because she's earned that authority the hard way. No asterisks. No, she's just a technical person. Just respect. Within 3 months, I'd rebuilt their monitoring infrastructure. Within 6 months, I'd written comprehensive runbooks for every critical system. Within a year, I'd trained 4 other engineers to the point where they could handle incidents when I wasn't around. Not because I was trying to make myself replaceable. Because I was trying to build something sustainable. And the company valued that. When my first annual review came up, Camila called me into her office. You've exceeded every expectation, she said. We're bumping you to $178,000 base and you're getting the full 18% bonus. Also, the board approved a retention grant of another 8,000 options. I stared at her. I haven't even been here a year. Exactly, she said. We don't wait until you're walking out the door to recognize what you're worth. We do it while you're here. That moment meant more than any salary number ever could. 20 months after I left Catalyst Solutions Group, I got an email from Elliot. Subject: would you consider consulting? The email explained that Catalyst was still struggling. They'd hired 3 engineers to replace me. 2 had left within 8 months. The institutional knowledge I'd carried was still missing. They wanted to bring me in as an external consultant. Not full-time. Just quarterly reviews, architecture audits, knowledge transfer sessions. The proposed rate, $325 per hour. 4-month contract. Estimated 50 hours. Total value, $16,250. For context, that was more than my entire annual bonus had been at Catalyst. 450 hours of occasional consulting. I read the email 4 times. Then I called Camila. My old company wants to hire me as a consultant, I said. What do you think? Do you want to help them? She asked. I'm not sure, I admitted. Part of me wants to say no on principle. Part of me thinks maybe they've actually learned something. Here's what I think, Camila said. If they're willing to pay you what you're actually worth now, and if they've genuinely changed how they treat people, then maybe it's worth helping them. Not because they deserve it. Because you'll know you took the high road. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I responded to Elliot. I'll consider it under these conditions. 1. Any recommendations I make get documented and shared with the entire engineering team. 2. I get full transparency into how you've changed compensation and retention practices since I left. 3. Preston publicly acknowledges in an all-hands meeting what went wrong and what the company learned. If you agree to those terms, we can talk. Elliot responded within 2 hours. All 3 accepted. When can you start? I did the consulting. Not because I needed the money. Because I wanted to see if they'd actually learned. The first session was a meeting with the executive team. Preston was there. Elliot, the new CTO, the board chair. I presented 1 slide. Why technical expertise matters more than credentials. I walked them through the incident. What had failed. Why it had failed. Why the failure was predictable. Why someone with an MBA and no technical background couldn't have prevented it. Why someone with 7 years of institutional knowledge could have. Then I showed them the financial impact. $22 million in lost contracts. $3.8 million in incident response costs. $2.1 million in emergency consulting fees. $980,000 in regulatory penalties. Uncounted reputational damage. Total, over $29 million. All because they'd saved $85,000 by not paying me fairly. The ROI on undervaluing expertise, minus 34,118%. Preston stared at the slide for a long time. Then he said quietly, "We made a catastrophic mistake." "Yes," I said. "You did. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again?" I spent the next 3 hours walking them through what Ironclad did differently. How they valued technical expertise. How they compensated based on impact, not credentials. How they built systems for knowledge sharing so no single person became a critical dependency. How they treated retention as a strategic priority, not an HR checkbox. At the end, the board chair, A woman named Angela Winters, who'd founded 2 successful companies, asked me one question. If you were running this company, what would you do first? I'd apologize, I said. Publicly. To every engineer you've undervalued. And I'd mean it. She nodded. Consider it done. 2 weeks later, Preston sent an all-hands email. I wasn't there to see it, but Aisha forwarded it to me. Read. 20 months ago we lost a critical engineer because we failed to recognize her value. That failure cost us clients, revenue, and credibility. More importantly, it cost us the respect of the people who keep this company running. We've since made changes to how we compensate technical talent, how we document institutional knowledge, and how we make decisions about retention. But those changes don't mean anything if we don't acknowledge what we got wrong. So I'm saying it clearly, we were wrong. We undervalued someone who deserved better. And we're committed to never making that mistake again. If you're an engineer at this company, your expertise matters. Your knowledge matters. You matter. Not because of your degree or your title. Because of what you actually do. It was signed by Preston. Aisha added a note. People are actually talking about this. Some are skeptical. But some believe it. Thought you'd want to know. I did want to know. Not because it changed what happened to me. Because it meant maybe the next engineer wouldn't have to learn this lesson the same way I did. Here's the part nobody tells you about walking away. It's not satisfying in the way you think it'll be. You don't feel vindicated when the company crashes. You don't feel victorious when executives lose their jobs. You don't even feel particularly angry. You just feel clear. Clear that you made the right choice. Clear that your value was never defined by what they were willing to pay. Clear that sometimes the best thing you can do is let people learn what you were worth by experiencing what happens when you're gone. 4 years after I left Catalyst Solutions Group, I'm still at Ironclad Data Systems. I'm now a distinguished engineer, the highest technical role in the company. I make $235,000 base. My bonus last year was $52,000. I have enough stock options that when we go public next year, I'll be financially secure for life. But more than that, I'm respected. When I say something's going to break, people listen. When I document a failure mode, it becomes required reading. When I suggest we slow down to do something correctly, nobody tells me to understand my position. Because my position is exactly where expertise should be. At the table with a voice being heard. So here's the lesson. The real one. The one hiding underneath all the technical details and corporate drama. If someone tells you to understand your position, believe them. They're showing you exactly how much they value you. And when they do, you have 2 choices. Option 1. Stay and hope things change. Keep proving yourself. Keep waiting for recognition that may never come. Keep accepting less than you're worth because you're loyal or tired or scared of change. Option 2. Leave cleanly, professionally, with your dignity intact and let the systems you built, or didn't build, teach them what you were worth. Option 2 is terrifying. But it's also the only one that gives you back your power. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know. The people who say, anyone can do your job, are the same people who have never tried. And the moment you stop doing it, they learn very quickly whether that was true. Sometimes it's not about revenge. Sometimes it's just about respect. And if you can't get it where you are, the best thing you can do is go somewhere that gives it freely. Because the CTO standing at your door 36 minutes later, begging you to come back? That's not a victory. It's just confirmation that you were right all along. 3 months ago I got a message from Connor Hayes, the HR person who told me to understand my position. He'd been let go from Catalyst 6 months after I left. He'd struggled to find another HR role. Word travels in this industry. The message was brief. I owe you an apology. What I said in that meeting was unprofessional and disrespectful. I was following a script I'd been given by leadership, but that doesn't excuse it. I'm sorry. I hope you're doing well. I read it twice. Then I responded. I appreciate the apology. I hope you've learned from it. Best of luck. I didn't need the apology to move on. I'd already moved on years ago. But I think maybe he needed to give it. Last month I gave a talk at a conference about building resilient data systems. During the Q&A someone raised their hand. How do you deal with organizations that don't value technical expertise? The room went quiet. I could see in the faces around me that this was a question a lot of people were carrying. I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, you can try to change the organization from within. Sometimes that works. But if you've been trying for years and nothing's changing, at some point you have to ask yourself, is my loyalty to this organization worth more than my respect for myself? Because here's what I learned. You teach people how to treat you. And if you accept being undervalued long enough, they'll believe that's all you're worth. So document your work. Build your network. Keep your skills sharp. And when you've had enough, walk away cleanly and let them figure out what they lost. The right organization won't need to lose you to recognize your value. They'll see it while you're there. The room erupted in applause. After the talk, at least 20 people came up to me. Engineers, architects, analysts, all carrying versions of the same story. I'm in the same situation you were in. They just hired someone with half my experience for 30% more than I make. I keep the whole system running and they keep telling me to be grateful I have a job. I gave them all the same advice. Know your worth. Document your value. Build your options. And when you're ready, don't be afraid to walk away. Because the organizations that deserve you will fight to keep you. The ones that don't will fight to replace you. And there's enormous power in knowing the difference. A few weeks ago I got a LinkedIn notification. Catalyst Solutions Group had posted their quarterly results. Revenue was up 23% year over year. They'd launched a new product line. They'd hired 30 new engineers. They'd restructured their entire compensation system. And buried in the earnings call transcript was this line from Preston. We've invested heavily in retaining technical talent and building a culture where expertise is valued. That investment has paid off significantly. I smiled when I read it. Not because I was bitter. Not because I wanted credit. Because they'd actually learned. And maybe, hopefully, the engineers working there now wouldn't have to teach them the same expensive lesson I did. My name is Kennedy Brooks. I'm 38 years old now. I still don't have an MBA. I still don't have an Ivy League degree. What I have is expertise earned through years of keeping fragile systems running, respect I no longer have to fight for, and the clarity that comes from knowing my worth doesn't depend on whether someone else recognizes it. I don't think about Catalyst Solutions Group much anymore. Not with anger. Not with regret. Just with the understanding that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who can't see your value. And let them learn the hard way what you were worth. Because in the end, that 36 minutes between my resignation and their desperation taught them more than 7 years of my work ever could. Sometimes people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. And that's not your problem to solve. It's theirs. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this. Your expertise has value. Real, measurable, significant value. And if the people you work for can't see that, there are plenty of people who will. You don't owe your loyalty to organizations that don't respect you. You don't owe your time to leaders who diminish you. You don't owe your knowledge to companies that underpay you. What you owe yourself is the courage to walk away when you've had enough. And the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, I don't work here anymore. Because 36 minutes later, when they're standing at your door begging you to come back, you'll know you made exactly the right choice. Not because they finally saw your worth. Because you did. And you decided it was worth more than they were offering. That's not revenge. That's respect. For yourself. And that's the only kind that really matters. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.